Hi guys, today we are going to be doing another ranking video and I feel like I'm so behind right now. I'm so behind. I feel like I don't even know how many palettes. We have like 16 or 17 palettes or something like that to rank. I'm thinking maybe I should start doing these monthly just to keep myself a little bit more accountable and not just like wait until things pile up and I feel like I need to do this. Let me know if I should do that because I have a lot right now. But I'm excited because my ranking video is one of my favorite videos that I do, and it's nice for me to just go back to palettes and tell you how I feel about them after having used them a little bit more. But before we get into the ranking video, this video is actually sponsored by Ofra, because Ofra reached out to me and they asked me if I wanted to, talk about their newest products that they've come out with. And I was very excited because their new release is basically a expansion of their Rodeo Drive highlighter. Now, if you are new to Ofra, this is one of their most iconic highlighters, which is why the collection is called the Iconic. And what they have done is that they have expanded their shade range with the Rodeo Drive highlighter so that it can fit more skin tones. So this highlighter is a neutral-based champagne highlighter. Is going to work for a lot of different people, and it is absolutely beautiful. It is such a pretty shade, and now they have a lighter shade of this one and a darker shade of this one. So the lighter shade is called Hills, and then we have the one called Brentwood, and these are so pretty. If you like a very, I don't like saying wearable, but it's the kind of highlighter that's going to go with basically any look that you're wearing. You're going to love this, especially now that they have expanded, because I find that for myself, sometimes Ofra's highlighters can be a little bit too just light for me. I prefer something that's a little bit darker personally. I don't like having that very intense white cast highlighter on my face. So what I'm wearing today actually is the dark one. So I'm wearing the shade called Brentwood. This could work on so many different skin tones, not just like someone who's pretty light like myself. I used this one and then I topped it with, this is very exciting because they have also come out with the Iconic Sparklight Topper. So this is a topper shade. It could be used on the eyes as well as the cheek. And I topped the dark highlighter with this, and oh my god, it looks so good. Like, I don't know if you can see just how beautiful and glowy this highlighter is. It is stunning, and I'm so excited for these because I feel like I'll be using these a lot because they are absolutely beautiful. I can also show you how the original highlighter looks on my face because I think that this one looks beautiful as well. I think I personally prefer something just a little bit darker, but I still think it's perfect for my skin tone. And I will show you how the sparkling topper looks on my eyes. I did do a look with this just using it on my eyes because I wanted to see. And it's really nice and shiny, and it's sparkly without being like glittery, if you know what I mean. It's a very sophisticated kind of sparkle, and if that is something that you like, I think you're really going to like this. And you can also use this as a highlighter on its own, which is also beautiful. Another thing that comes in the Iconic collection is this makeup fixer. Now, I haven't used this on my face yet because this is a little too glowy for my liking. I did spray it on my hand and kind of like spread it around, and it looks so pretty. Like, I used a little bit of this on my body yesterday, and the subtle shine it gives is just really beautiful. I feel like a lot of people would love this on their face as well. Personally, for me, it's a little bit too much. But like I said, I think there is a very big market for something like this, and I'm definitely going to be saving this and using this for my body if I'm going to be outside and stuff like that, because it really just adds that very nice summery kind of glow to it. And I'm just really excited to have these products. If you do want to pick any of this up, you can use my code Annette to save 20% off. I will leave an affiliated link down below in my description box. And if you want to buy the collection, you can choose one of the highlighters, as well as it comes with the topper and the spray in this really cute makeup bag that says Iconic on it. All of these products are available right now if you're interested. I will leave the link down below in my description box. Thank you, Ofra, for sponsoring this part of the video. Let's go ahead and get into ranking some palettes because, like I said, we have a lot of palettes and I don't even know where to begin. I haven't even tried to rank these palettes yet because honestly, I'm slightly overwhelmed, but this needs to happen. And I know some of you are like, man, you seem so stressed every time you have to rank palettes. Listen, it's hard. These are all my babies and I don't like to choose between my babies, but sometimes we have to do hard things. Now, if you're wondering what is on my eyes today, this palette is not going to be in this ranking because I just started filming with it. Like, this is my first look, but this is the Vitality palette from Unearthly Cosmetics. It is beautiful, and I freaking love this look. I love this look so much. I'm quite obsessed. So, needless to say, I'm having a good time with this, but for the palettes that we're going to be ranking today, oh my god, this is so hard. Like, I struggled so much to put these together, and I think that This ranking could have changed just depending on my mood and depending on the day, and just there's so much that just mood based would go into where I put these palettes, because literally what I had to do today was just which one would I rather use right now in this very moment. Like, would I use this palette over this palette, or would I choose this one instead? That's basically what I did, because honestly, all of these palettes, well, maybe except for the last one, but even the last one is not a bad palette. Like, all of these are really, really nice. And I don't think that you would be disappointed in any of these palettes. I think this is the hardest ranking video that I've probably ever had to do, because the quality of these are just so good. And I feel like there's not a lot of bad makeup and bad eyeshadow that's coming out right now. So just a short disclaimer at the beginning of the video, I don't dislike any of these palettes except for maybe this one. So this is the Wet n Wild Lilo and Stitch palette. I did get this set in PR, and honestly, there's a lot of reasons why I don't love this palette. Number one, there's a pressed glitter in here, which I don't gravitate towards using palettes with pressed glitters because I just don't like them. The shimmers are just meh okay, and I don't like Wet n Wild's packaging, I'll be honest. Like, the cheap plastic packaging is just very off-putting to me, and I'm just not a fan. Next up is a palette here. This is from Belle Beauty Bar. And this, again, this is not a bad palette at all, but I had to rank it somewhere. And I think the reason why it ended up so low is just because I don't love the mattes in this palette. The shimmers are beautiful, but again, I had to put it somewhere and I had to drag it down just because there is a couple of things that I don't love about this. Like I said, I don't love the mattes in this palette. I don't find them to be very buildable, so you have to really do very simple looks with this. I wouldn't go in and like try to build all of these pinks and purples on top of each other, because it's just not going to work. It's going to get a little bit patchy, but again, the shimmers almost make up for it, because these are these beautiful, you know, like shiny, wet looking shimmers that I just absolutely like. Look at that. Like, that is so pretty. Like, you cannot tell me that these don't have beautiful shimmers. But I had to put it somewhere. And there's also two quite dark shimmers in here, like three kind of dark shimmers, which I don't really use. These two both are kind of like satiny shades, which again, not really the biggest fan of. So I did have to put it somewhere. But if you look at this palette and you think it's a nice palette, I think you're going to like it. It's not a bad palette at all. It's just, I wouldn't reach for that palette over some of these other palettes that I have in front of me. This next palette here is a palette that I actually like this more than I thought I would, but I still can't see myself using it that often, just because the color story is quite, I don't want to say boring, but like, it's kind of boring. It's not that exciting. So this is from Flower Nows. I did do a video with this brand. I can link that in the corner because their products are beautiful. But this is one of the palettes from the Circus collection, and as you can see, quite a neutral sort of wearable palette. But honestly, the formulas in this are really, really nice. If you're looking for a neutral palette that's on the softer side that you can use on a daily basis to have beautiful shimmers and beautiful mattes, I mean, this is it. It's a really pretty palette, but obviously I'm not going to be using it that often just because it is quite brown. And like, even though I do like neutrals, I don't want to wear them that often, but there is a time and place for them. And for that reason is why I ended up buying this palette that's next. This is not a palette that I've done a dedicated video on. I don't know if you've even seen that I have this palette unless you watched a video where I showed all of the looks that I did while I was on vacation. I can link that up in the corner too, because some of these other palettes are in that video as well, and I use them a lot, and you will see a lot of different looks using these palettes. So this is the Stone Cold Fox palette from ColourPop. Now, reason why I bought this is because it's not as big as you would think, and it has basically every neutral that you would ever need, and I thought it would just be really nice for traveling, because I don't really have like bone color mattes and stuff like that, and a lot of blacks in a lot of my other palettes, and I just thought that having some nice deep dark neutrals would be, you know, helpful to play with a lot of these all shimmer palettes that I also brought while I was gone, and it did a really good job doing that. I like the formulas in this palette. I don't think it's amazing. I didn't use any of the shimmers. I don't think. I just used the mattes because I don't care for these shimmers. Like, I have so many more beautiful shimmers in my collection that I'd rather use. But I think my one issue with this palette is I feel like even though a lot of these mattes look really, really dark, on the eyes they don't look as dark, and they kind of lose a little bit of their intensity when you start blending them out. But of course there's a black in here, so like you can help it with that. But I do feel like generally with all of these mattes, they appear a little bit softer on the eyes than they do in the pan, which is a little bit disappointing for me because I do prefer to get the same results on the eyes than what it looks like in the palette. So I don't love that palette for that reason, but it definitely did a good job at just providing me with all of the neutrals and stuff that I needed to, you know, have with other palettes while I was traveling. So I do like the palette. I'm glad I have it in my collection. I probably am going to bring it traveling again if I go somewhere, just to have like that basic neutral palette, unless I find one that's more, I don't know what I'm looking for, I guess. Next up is a palette here that I love the looks that I did with this. I had so much fun with this palette, but I don't love the mattes in this. So this is the It's Belle Summer Cool palette. No, Cool Summer palette. Here's what the palette looks like. Like I said, I love the looks that I did with this. I think they turn out absolutely beautiful. The shimmers in here are out of this world, which I expected nothing less from It's Belle. They have an amazing shimmer formula, and this is their first time venturing into mattes. So I wasn't sure exactly what to expect, and I feel like my expectations for their mattes weren't that great just from swatching them and from my first impression touching them, and that's kind of how I felt like they performed on the eyes as well. The blues aren't very buildable, they're not very opaque. It's kind of a thin matte formula, and that's not my favorite. So for that reason, even though I love the color story, I love the shimmers, I have to put it quite low just because, again, I have to rank these somewhere. And again, it's not like I don't like these palettes. I just want to make that very clear. I think all of these palettes that are coming up here are amazing palettes, and I think that most of you would probably like them if you had them. So next up, this is a palette that it hurts me to put this low, and this is such a petty reason for putting it this low as well, but I've talked about this in the past. This is from Sugar Drizzle, and this is the Man I Love Frogs palette. I love the idea behind this palette. I love the cuteness of this palette. I love the names. I love the color story. But when you look at this and you look up close, you can probably see there's been oils that's basically seeped all over the palette. So like this whole top section is just covered in kind of like wet, greasy looking oil. And it just looks gross. Like I'm sorry, like I just don't like it, okay? Like I know for myself, I'm not gonna reach for this palette because every time I open it, I'm like, ew. Like it just gives me that icky feeling, and I'm not a fan of this, but I know that they have sold some of the palettes that have this issue for a discount. So if you don't mind this at all, you can probably still pick this up. I'm not sure, and I think that they've probably fixed that issue now. I'm not really sure, but I feel like this is something that happens with a lot of these really like emollient, kind of creamy, buttery type shimmers. Not all brands have this issue, but if you don't get the ratio right between the binder and the actual shadows, they end up being too wet and they just kind of like go all over the palette, and it's just not a cute look. So for that petty reason, I have to put it quite low, but I love the palette. I love the formulas. I love everything about that palette except for that. Next up is actually another Sugar Drizzle palette, and I don't know exactly why these ended up so low down, but it's just one of those things that I would rather use some of these other palettes over these at this very moment. Now, I did just do a video with this palette. This is called the Meant to Be palette. It's a cute 6-pan. Usually smaller palettes end up quite low in these ranking videos because they are quite limiting. So that's another reason why this palette ended up quite low. Now, I don't have the problem with the seeping of the oils in this palette, which I love that. And it also could be because of the background. I love the background in this. I love the packaging with the kind of sparkly, I'm not sure if you can really see, but it's such a cute packaging. But why this ended up a little bit lower on my list is because I don't find this multi-chrome to really be like all that. Like it's a pretty shade, but it's not very shiny. It doesn't shift very strongly. It's a pretty subtle multi-chrome, and it's also very dark. And this shade next to it here, I had a little bit of a hard time working with this. I felt like it hard panned like as soon as I swatched it, and it took a little bit of work to just like get it onto my brush and get it onto my eyes. But once you get there, it's really pretty. All of these other shades are beautiful. I really like this dark purple matte, and I really like these 3 shimmers. But since there are 2 shades in the 6-pan palette that I'm just not the biggest fan of, then I feel like it just had to end up quite low. The next palette here is a palette that I genuinely like every shade in this palette, and I had such a good time playing with this. This one is from Lethal, and this is their 1-Up palette. This packaging is so cute. I love the little like gaming machine, and then how it sort of flips on the screen here. That's very adorable. But here is what the palette looks like. And I really like this color story. I feel like they killed it with the shimmers in this, especially like this shade right here. is so pretty. Like I just love these kind of shades. They make me so happy. The mattes in here are beautiful as well. I didn't have any problems with this palette. I love this dark blue matte. This one performed so well when I used it. And again, I think that the reason why it's not higher is just because I feel like I've maybe kind of seen this color store. I mean, look, it's similar to what I'm wearing today, if I'm being completely honest. So clearly I like this kind of thing, but I don't know. It just doesn't inspire me that much, even though it's a beautiful palette, beautiful color story. It's just, I just don't really want to use, like if I'm going to do my makeup tomorrow, this is not the palette that I'm going to reach for just because of the color story I get. I don't even know where I'm going with this anymore because it's just really hard to rank these, but hey, I gotta put it somewhere. Next up, this is a palette that I haven't played with nearly enough. I would love to do more looks with this, but I simply just haven't had time because there's always things coming into my collection, and I do try to be good about doing more than one look with every palette that I get, but with this one, I just didn't have time. I think I only did one look with this, and that's all I've done. But it is quite a small palette, and this is the Unearthly Cosmetics in the Dark palette. Now, this was a re-release from their Christmas collection last year, holiday collection last year, except that they switched out one of the shades because they were too similar. But this color story is so pretty. Like, this is a beautiful color story. I really want to play with this more, but again, I simply just haven't had time to dip back into this, but I think this is beautiful. I can't really say too much about the formulas in this, but the mattes are nice from the ones that I used. The shimmers, I don't think I actually used the shimmers on my eyes because I was trying something else with it, but they're really pretty shimmers. Like, they're not the most kind of foiled wet looking shimmers, but they're just really nice metallics, and I think they go very beautifully with this color story as well, so I really do like this palette. Next up is another palette from Unearthly. Have they come out? Man, they have come out with so many palettes lately. I feel like half of these palettes are from Unearthly, and I just realized that right now. Like, they are coming out with so many different palettes. But they also did send me a couple that were in their collection already. Like this one. This is also a kind of re-release, I guess. But this is the Bunnies palette. I think this was a Easter release from last 2 years ago, maybe. I'm not really sure. But they did send this to me. And I had a blast playing with this. Normally, I'm not super into like the pastel-y vibes and like lighter looks. But I have been lately, and this palette is so fun. Like I said, I had such a good time with this. I have videos with all of these palettes, I'm pretty sure. If you just search my channel, you can probably find them. It shouldn't be hard at all, but had a blast with this. I think this is a very nicely curated pastel palette. I love that all of the shimmers in here are light enough to go with all of these mattes. I find that sometimes with pastel palettes, brands will put in like a lot of pastel mattes and then have darker shimmers, and I'm just like, what am I supposed to do with this? But I feel like this palette, like everything just makes sense. Everything goes together, and the looks that I did were just really cute and fun and playful, and I like that. This next palette here, I almost wanted to put this higher, honestly, because I find myself thinking about this palette and wanting to use this palette and then not really being able to at this moment because, like I said, I am still reviewing palettes and I'm still trying new palettes, but like I'm gravitating towards it. Like, I want to use this palette more, and this is the Nearly Natural palette from Glaminatrix. Now, I know this is a neutral palette. Annette, what are you doing? Like I said, I've been kind of into neutrals lately, and I think that the matte selection in this is just so pretty, and these shimmers are so beautiful. I did use this palette for a look that I didn't film. I probably have a picture I can put up on the screen, but I basically just threw one of the very light mattes in my crease, and I put one of the shimmers on my lid and did like some graphic liners, and it looks so pretty. Like, it just sparkled and glistened so nicely in the sun, and it just looked beautiful, and I want to use this palette more. Like I said so many times, I wish I had 100 eyes. I wish I could do my makeup 10 times a day and that would be fine because I would probably play a lot with this palette. I think it's beautiful. Okay, come on. I know I'm over here like gushing over neutrals, but it's a beautiful palette. Next up, let's talk about probably my favorite Sugar Drizzle palette, and this is the Sugar Dreams palette. This is, again, from Sugar Drizzle, and this is one of their kind of pastel-y all shimmer palettes. I've said many times in the past, I prefer having light to mid-tone shimmers and darker mattes, and this is right up my alley. Like, all of these are so beautiful. The formulas are so nice. Like this color up here, this one, I mean, I just want to use them. I just want to slap them on my face. This one in particular is freaking stunning. It's such a shifty shade. Like I said, this is probably my favorite Sugar Soul palette. I think this is so pretty. And I'm also not having any issues here with like that oil seepage. So I do feel like they've fixed that issue, because with their last two palettes, I haven't had any problems with it. It was just like some of their earlier palettes. So I think it's probably safe to say that it's not going to happen again. But then again, I don't want to promise anything because I don't know. Next up is another Unearthly palette, and this is an all shimmer palette. This is one of the palettes that I brought on my trip when I was gone for about 2 weeks, so I got to use this quite a bit. I probably used this like 5 times maybe, but this is the Don't Be Jelly palette, and oh my god, the shimmers in here are so pretty. I don't know if you can see the shifts in some of these colors, but it's so beautiful. Like, oh my god, these are so metallic and shiny, and I just, oh, they're so beautiful. They're so beautiful. I know this is a pretty expensive palette, but if you're looking for special shimmers in a palette, this might be for you. I think you would love it, because I truly do love it, and I've had so much fun using that palette, and I keep wanting to use it again. Like that's one of those palettes that I'm like, I keep wanting to use. Like I want to combine these two palettes. Like that would be so fun. Like that's what I want to do. Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm into right now. Like kind of combining like special shimmers with more neutral mattes. I think it just looks so good. So next up is a new to me brand, a new to me palette. I only did one look with this because I didn't have time to do more. Story of my life. But this is the Druid palette from Fantasy Cosmetica. I've been so impressed by their formulas. I think that their palettes are so nice. This is another one that I really want to get back into. I want to dig into this. The shimmers are so pretty. Like I love these formulas. Look at that. Oh, so pretty. Like even this one, even though it's not really my kind of shade, but all of these are so beautiful. And the mattes in this are so buttery, so silky, so smooth, so just rich. I love them. I think they're beautiful. My only complaint is that I feel like these two shades are a little bit too similar, and maybe one of them could have been slightly different, but other than that, I think this is a stunning palette. Next up, I feel like some of you are gonna be surprised and maybe a little bit disappointed. I'm almost a little bit disappointed in myself, and I don't know why this palette didn't end up on top. Actually, I know, because these other palettes are just so good, and I feel like it's not that I've seen this before, but this is the new Blend Bunny palette. So this is the Primal palette, and I think the reason why it didn't end up higher is because I feel like the tones of these mattes, I feel like I want to reach for the Blends palette and the Surge palette a little bit more over these. And I don't know why. It's just, I feel like the tones in the other ones are the ones that I'm more drawn to. And not that there is anything at all wrong with this palette. I think it's beautiful. I think the formulas are really nice. I also think that for me, this isn't a standalone palette because the matte or the shimmers are just too dark for me personally. I like the shades individually. I like the formulas individually. But these mattes paired with like this palette, I feel like I need to pull in something lighter. I feel like they're just, for my personal preference, a little bit too dark. But I love the formulas, obviously, because it's Blend Bunny, and I love their mattes. They have my favorite matte formula of all time. So I don't know. I wish I could have put it higher, but since I just don't love it as much as some of these other palettes, it hurts me to say. I'm sorry, Blend Bunny. I love you so much. But I felt like I just had to put these, is it 4 palettes? Yeah, these last 4 palettes I had to put a little bit higher because they just make me really excited. They make me tickle. They make me want to use them. So next up is another palette from Fantasy Cosmetica, and this is their newest palette. This is the Sorcerer palette, and there's something about this color story to me that just, again, it just makes me want to use this palette. It's so beautiful. The shimmers in here are out of this world. I think they did a better job curating the mattes in this palette than they did in their first palette. There's so much you can do with this, despite it only being a 9-pan palette. I think that this is super versatile, and it's just a fun color story. It's a fun theme. It's great formulas. I love the packaging. I love how kind of small and sleek these are. I don't have anything negative to say about this palette. I think it's just really nice. In the number 3 spot is a palette that this is another one of those that I keep thinking about, that I keep wanting to play more with, and every time I see it, I'm like, I want to use it because it just makes me really excited. I've only used this 2 or 3 times now, and I haven't done like a lot more like full looks with this palette. I've used this in conjunction with other things when I haven't been filming quite a bit, and this is the new Ace Beauté Palatably palette. I just think that this is such a fun palette. Like this color story, it's just so inspiring to me. I love the tones in this. Like honestly, I could have done the same look that I'm wearing today with this palette. Let me combine these two palettes. Let me just kind of show these palettes side by side because I feel like they're very similar. Like that was the first thing that I thought when I saw the Vitality palette from Unearthly. It's like, wow, that looks exactly like the Palatably palette. Like, aren't these very, very similar? I feel like you can do very similar looks with these, and I feel like if you have this one, you don't need this one, and if you have this one, you don't need this one. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of similarities between these two palettes. They're definitely not exact dupes, but there's a lot of similar shades in these, not gonna lie. But I really do like this palette from Ace Beauté. I think they killed it with this. This is, I almost said my favorite color story from them, but then again, it's tough because they have so many beautiful color stories, but I really do enjoy this. I think the mattes are amazing quality. I have never had any problems with the new formula from Ace Beauté, building and blending, and they do what I want them to do. And the shimmers are beautiful as well. They're very metallic, very shiny. They remind me a little bit of the Beauty Bay formula, but these I find are easier to work with. They're not as thick. They're a little bit on the thinner side, and they pick up better on a brush, and they just look really nice and shiny on the lids. And like I said, I think they killed it with this palette. In the number 2 spot, this is I love being able to rank this so high because I had so much fun with this, and even when going through to rank these palettes, it still made me so happy to look at, even though I just finished filming with this a few days ago and I did 3 looks with it. And usually after I've done 3 looks with the palette, I'm like content and I'm like okay to move on to something else, but honestly I just want to keep using this. And this is the new Nomad palette. This is the I forget the name of this already because it doesn't say the actual name on the packaging. It's the Monteverde Forest something palette. I'm sorry. I will link all of the palettes down below if you want to go check them out. But I did get this sent in PR, and I do have a code with Nomad. It's just Annette, and it will save you 10% off. I've had all of my other codes and stuff on the screen so that I don't have to say it for every single palette. But since this is a very new palette, and I'm sure a lot of you are still interested in getting this, you can save some money if you use my code. But oh my god, this palette is so pretty. It's so pretty. It's so colorful. It's so bright. It's so inviting to look at. I love the shimmer formula in this. It's absolutely beautiful. This is the best palette that I've ever tried from Nomad, and I'm just excited to see what they do in the future after this. They did tell me that they were going to come out with some more, like, look at that shade, some more like neutral palettes, and that maybe I wouldn't like that, but I was like, listen, I can do neutrals now. It's okay. I'll play with some neutrals. I'm not mad at it. So maybe they're going to be like swaying in the other direction and doing something super colorful now and then doing something a little bit more toned down and neutral next time. But I just hope there's depth in the palette. If there's depth in it, I don't care what the other neutrals are. I can jive with a neutral palette if it goes dark enough. But I think this is really pretty, and I'm so happy I have this palette. I would have bought this if I wasn't sent it in PR because I think the color story is so pretty. Now, in my number 1 spot, this is also one of the palettes that I brought on my trip that I wanted to review and, you know, tell you guys about. And I used this palette, I think, pretty much every time I did my makeup, maybe I used one of those shades every time. It was pretty close. So I've probably used this like 10 times now. And this is the Unearthly All I Ever Wanted original palette. They did send me this one. They sent me the new one that came out. So this has been around for quite some time. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring this. I'm going to bring this as one of my only shimmers that I'm bringing on my trip. And I used so many of these colors. I think it is such a pretty all shimmer palette. Again, it has some of these formulas that I just absolutely love, like these wet looking shimmers and all of these iridescent ones. They came in so handy for me to use as not only face highlighters, but in a corner shade. This shade up here, I used as a face highlighter so many times, and it's the most beautiful iridescent pink shade. This shade looks orange in the pan, but on the eyes it looks green. Like, it's just insane. Like, some of these colors, some of these blues too, they're just so pretty. Like, I am smitten by this palette. I think it's so pretty. It's quite expensive. I want to say it's like $80, but you get a lot of shades in here, and all of I don't think that any of these shades are duds. Like, there wasn't a single shade that I used that I was like, I don't like this. There's definitely like different formulas in here, but I don't find that any of them are bad. They're just different. Like these two up here are more of like your basic metallics. They don't have that kind of like texture to them, but look at how pretty those are. And then we have this one, which is more of a like a sort of a toppery. It's a little bit on the satiny side, but it's also just really beautiful and shiny. And this one is, it's hard to explain, but it's also a little bit of a satin, but it makes for a beautiful smoky eye, and it makes for a nice kind of like deepening up shade in the outer corner if you don't want to use a matte. I love this palette. I think it's stunning, and I'm so happy I have it in my collection. This is another one that I can see myself easily traveling with again and bringing this along with like all matte palettes like this. I brought the Blend Bunny Blends palette. I also brought the Colourpop palette that I said, just go watch that video, because I really like the idea of just filming everything that I did for, you know, like 2 weeks while I was gone. And it was cool to see what I reached for over and over again and what kind of looks I ended up doing. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun filming that video, and I also had a lot of fun filming this ranking video. Let me know if you were surprised by any of these. I feel bad for some of the palettes that I ended up ranking quite low, but I really do think that all of the palettes in this video were really nice palettes, and it could just be a personal preference thing, color story thing. That's kind of how it goes with these ranking videos. It's really hard to put one in front of another when they're all so good. And I feel like there's been so much amazing makeup that's come out this year that I'm dreading doing my top 10 palettes of the year, because oh my god, there will be blood because I don't know if I can do it. It's gonna be so hard. But anyway, that's gonna be it for this ranking video. Don't forget to check out the new Ofra products. Thank you for sponsoring this video. If you want to see some other ranking videos, I do of course have a playlist. I'll put that right there. And if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.